So, what would you like to jump into next? Should we jump into AGI soon, but
Wait,
narrower
he had
tracker?
a second
Okay.
page prepared.
Oh,
Oh, sorry. Go
if
for
you
your
want
second. No,
next
go
with
for your
Sam
second.
Altman.
Go for your second. Yes, let's do that. Second page.
Yeah. So I'll just go up. I'll put
This
this.
freaking handwriting, beautiful. Jesus.
Yeah, we got to get these things scanned and put them in the episode.
Yeah,
Yeah,
scan them.
I'll
I'll
take
put them,
it.
put them in the reading notes, please, later on. So,
Thank you. Sorry, I just scribble all the time. So the idea is if we want to fund the future of AI chip ownership in U.S. and U.S. ally control rather than China or Russia and Iran, then we have to incentivize people to bring chips from around the world into those U.S. holdings. Literally, we want the U.S. to hold all the chips on the table. And the way we can get the biggest multiplier for that incentive structure is by having a new kind of dollar that would operate alongside the paper dollar. This new dollar can only be bought using paper dollars, so it maintains the reserve value of paper dollars because it's the only path to buy in. This new dollar is backed by computer chips. So if you have $1,000 bill, you could go have an NVIDIA behind it. And that's the real thing. That's the chip. The chip is the real dollar. And this is a receipt paper or a receipt on a crypto ledger. So you're not printing money because you can only issue one of these once you have the physical chip.
Right.
And there's server banks who are operating these chips and running services on the internet. So they're running the apps, the AI. That earns a real revenue. And you, as the chip dollar holder, are earning a dividend from the chips operation. So it's a way to turn chips as a capital into an asset class that's also liquid and U.S. government secure. That would be a huge multiplier to pull all the chips onto our table. And you get easily 7 trillion from Forex and non-performing real estate and government bonds in Germany and Japan. They'd love to have a dividend on a dollar instead.
It's like a gold-backed dollar, except that it's chip-backed.
Yes.
And since the chips are assets, they're producing some
Revenue.
revenue that can be shared with the owner as a dividend. How do you
Go ahead.
How do you compare this to a petrodollar?
This is meant to subsidize the dollar holdings around the world while the petrodollar depletes, because we're going to be moving off of petrol. You want chip-backed dollars to back the U.S. currency. So the people would still issue debt in U.S. dollars and stuff like that.
Right, and I don't think petrodollars are productive, are they? You don't get any dividend from holding them.
No, it's just a commodity. Yeah, capital is the thing you want to have backing your dollar, because capital you would incentivize. You'd be incentivizing more capital production.
Right, so this is a way to encourage the build out of all these chips and data centers, to get investors into them.
Yes.
To potentially share some of the revenue with the larger population, which I think is part of Sam's goal in this whole thing.
It would lower prices for U.S. and U.S. allies for all our apps, basically.
Yep. It also sort of, in an interesting indirect way, makes the dollar stronger against other currencies, right?
Because people need the paper dollar to buy into the chip dollar.
Right. So like the petrodollar. And then to your point, is a way to transition from the strength of the petrodollar in the past as it weakens this chip dollar. Is it called the chip dollar?
Yeah, just call it chip dollar. It's I call it chip backed dollars, but that might be too much.
Oh yeah, that's not going to last. It's going to get shortened.
Yeah.
It's more accurate, but it's not going to last. And so it's a way to transition from this petrodollar regime to a new chip dollar regime. So this is really fascinating. What are the arguments against it?
I mean, there's going to be a lot of like the open source anonymous community who say, "Oh no, but the U.S. government is owning all the chips now." I think that's better than China. If I have to pick between the two, it's going to be one or the other.
Yeah, you got me there.
My battery is running low. Let me try.
Uh-oh.
no problem.
I'm going to plug this in.
Get a power supply.
Yeah, no, I thought this was a really novel idea, and I also like how you usually hear people say, "All right, we'll fix all of our currency issues by just going back to gold." I'm like, yeah, we go back to gold, and then we might create a deflationary crisis, and we'll be back to where we were in the 1890s, and the whole I forgot who it was, the cross of silver. The farmers were pissed because the dollar wasn't inflating enough, and the farmers had their mortgages, and it became more expensive. What I like about your idea, Anthony, is you said, no, like, keep the current regime, but then you have chips dollar here, and if people want to move dollars to chips, the chips dollar, they can do it. and it's not like
Mhm.
it's not an all or nothing. But then also what I like what Joe
Exactly.
mentioned too is like Sam's going through this whole WorldCoin thing, which I think is it's great. He's trying to do this like to get the dividends from what's coming out of this. If this AI future happens, that everyone gets
Mhm.
advantage of this. But he's dealing with a lot of countries who are going to try to block him and attack him because they look at it as a direct threat. Whereas yours
Yeah.
is like, no, 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 this strengthens the U.S. It doesn't attack the current regime, but then also
Mhm.
any Joe Schmo, doesn't matter where you are in the economic stratum, can put money into this and now get a return off of what's going off of AI and chips. So I thought that was really cool.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Continue with like just like have you floated this idea to like economists? Have you? Because one of my friends actually has a master's in econ who watches this show. I'm not gonna give his name, but I'm gonna tell him he knows who he is to watch it and give me feedback on this.
Yes. Yeah. If this message can just get into Sam's ear or like, someone with some Fed cred, I would be happy just to tell them about it. I don't need to be involved in the details. But
Right, because
I can't tell them about auction models and stuff.
Right. Well, because the Fed, I mean, they were getting pressure from crypto, this and that, and in the U.S., like I think in one bill they said they were going to create like U.S. Crypto dollars or something. I forgot exactly what it was, but it was like the federal government saying, "Oh, hey, we don't want to miss out on the crypto aspect of what's going on here." And now this is like maybe there might be some people in the federal government who are interested in this idea because there's like a lot of positive externalities from it, from the fact of like now we're going to invest in more chips, more jobs are going to be created, and whatnot. So I think that was really cool. And then also made me think about like Bitcoin, which I like the idea of Bitcoin that it's like, hey, this is something, it's a third party currency that's not controlled by governments, but it's kind of like,
I'm a crypto fan.
Oh yeah, we are. Yep. I believe in the promise and all that, but I also think like, hey, if I could give it to Bitcoin, but like, I get a coin and it's not really doing anything, or I can get a chip dollars where the money's actually, investing in capital, improving, like producing more chips. I like that. Anything else you want to talk about?
It's just a commodity, but no dividend.
No, you're right. You're right, Joe. Anything more you two want to hit on the chip dollar? Go for it, Joe.
You compared it also to Edison's idea of the real estate-backed dollar. Can you explain that one?
It was just about 100 years ago. Edison was offering a real estate-backed dollar. I think it was in response to the Depression, because real estate earns revenue, if not just as rentals, but as like agricultural land or mining land. And so he was saying the national reserve of real estate could be a dollar backing that would be less volatile and not subject to just wanton printing. That was one of his concerns, is just the hyperinflation. And that's one of the issues with my thing, is you can only print one of these dollars when you actually have the chip. You can't just make crypto tokens. That's right.
It's a harder form of money.
Yes, which makes it more valuable.
Right. Interesting. And I don't think the real estate backed dollar idea got very far. What was the objection to it? I mean, I should also add that now people are really upset that there's a bunch of billionaires who are buying up huge amounts of farmland, right?
Yes. Yeah, it's kind of happening inadvertently because real estate's a hedge against inflation. Yeah. But yeah, I think it was just the institutional inertia. Maybe they had the Federal Reserve happening around the same time. I don't know the details, but there's usually a lot of pressure against changing things, so I wouldn't be surprised. It was also the time when Henry George was popular. He was talking about a similar idea.
I was just thinking about. I was just going to bring up like Georgism, and maybe you can talk a little about
Georgism.
that. Yeah.
Oh, I'm not an expert. I'm not a Georgian.
Okay, I'll just parrot from what I heard from Peter Thiel. Well, basically, like, the whole Georgist theory back in the 1890s, early 20th century was like, hey, why is it that you have people who are creating productive things like factories and people who are creating new ideas, but then putting 30 to 40% of their income to some landlord who's not really doing anything? We need to maybe figure out a better way out of this model. And I don't know his exact theory, but it was basically him challenging that rents are like basically too damn high. And then Peter was talking about the 1990s. He was like, if you would have told me that Manhattan rents would be like 2x, 3x, 10 or 15 years later, I would have said you're smoking crack. And I think of that a lot is like, Anthony, are you a Bay Area OG? Because you're up in Oakland, right? Have you been here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know Harry's Hofbräu? Do you remember that place?
I've never been there. No.
Okay, you lost your credibility. Then get off the show. And I'm just
I'm sorry.
Harry,
I make rice at home.
No, you're good. You're good, man. No, you're a man of the people. So, me and Joe are bourgeoisie. There's a place called Harry's Hofbräu, and it's a German meal house, and they make really good roast beef and turkey. But they started in the 1950s, 1960s in San Jose. But they had a really good lease agreement, and they closed like 2 years ago. But up until then, you could get like a gigantic plate of food, like a big thing of roast beef. You can get mashed potatoes. You could also get 2 sides. You would then get a dessert and everything, and Caesar salad, and it would cost like $15. And I was thinking about the aspect of it. It was like when you go to a restaurant, you're literally eating the rent. When a new restaurant comes out, they're paying so much for rent that they have to make their portion smaller. Whereas Harry's had a really good lease agreement, so they can give more to their customers. So that was like his peers saying like, hey, like I know I'm libertarian, but there's probably something to be said about Georgism here about how rents are going.
Yeah. And something to be said for sorry. Yeah.
No, go for it.
Boom towns, because we used to do this in America. We would make a new city and the rent would be low. And that would incentivize reinvestment, and you'd have industry build out and infrastructure. And with suburbia, we stopped building new cities. We just expanded around the existing core, and we decided you just can't make a new city. But that's the best way to incentivize new industry.
Yeah, I was really thinking about that because I was talking to a family friend of mine, and his family were like the founding family of Santa Clara. They literally Santa Clara's right next to San Jose. They literally gave some of their land to city halls so they could build their city hall on top of it. And then some of the family went to Central Valley, and back then all you had to do was like basically say, hey, I want territory from this area here to this area, about like thousands of acres or so, and I'll take care of it. And you go to a real estate department, and they give you your title, and you now own the real estate. But the rule was, going to your point, you had to do something economical with it, and they had promised that they were going to turn it into farmland. And the families held on to it to this day, and they're still producing walnuts on it or whatnot. But they were able to get acres of land, and they're able to start kind of like a new city. And I think that's one of the issues we're dealing with. And that's why I thought with work from home, I was like, oh, finally now we can force people not to, well, people aren't forced anymore to go to these very expensive hubs. They can now go to the Midwest. They can expand out again and live a decent quality of life and actually create new ideas without having to worry about paying their mortgage for $7,000 to $8,000 a month.